Recently have received a couple messages asking me about this product from MicroJig, and what it is potentially a replacement for this little device that Shopsmith manufactures that they call a T-Nut. I've referenced it several times because I use them on a lot of jigs and fixtures. They can slide into the T-slot miter gauge, obviously on either side. They can slide to the top or the face of the 520 fence. Again, for holding jigs fixtures, if you own a 510 model rip fence, they can be installed in the top of the rip fence. Now, the first question we have to ask ourselves is, does this even fit in the slot? And the answer to that is a resounding yes. Now, it is a little bit more sloppy left to right than the typical Shopsmith T-Nut. That's pretty tight. This one's got quite a bit more play. I was curious about this because the Shopsmith miter slot is a hair narrower than your traditional 3/4 inch wide slot, and so I was concerned that that might not fit. You'll also see that there is a threaded insert in this one that has a nylon set screw. So you can lock that in place, and that acts as a stop. So if you have a miter gauge or a jig that's sliding in your miter slot, you could have this positioned and stop it at any point. That could be really handy. Now, from here, a couple other questions that I had, and sometimes I use these T-Nuts as miniature little miter bars because I can flip these over and they will fit into the miter slot and can then travel with a jig. That's not going to be a good idea with this one because, again, there's just a bit too much play. The way these go together is you have what is essentially a 1/4 toilet bolt or a T-bolt that drops in here, and then that is going to be retained by a rubber O-ring. So you've got to roll that down all the way to the bottom, and you might need to push it on in with a screwdriver just to get it below the surface, and so that's ready to go. Then I might have a jig or something between this point and where I would then add a washer and add this knob that comes with this. And then that would lock my So one question that I had for the folks at MicroJig, and that was, would it be possible to use this threaded insert with a knob? Sometimes I want a knob, sometimes I want a nut. This one I have with a nylock insert, and that's fixed. So I use that as a knob with a threaded stud, the same way I would use this one, only I can adjust this in because I have that nylon insert. These, by the way, if you don't know about them, are called Bittner nuts. I would recommend you check them out. They are a very inexpensive replacement for a knurled knob, and even can be a replacement for this. So my question for the folks at MicroJig was, is it possible to use that threaded insert together with a knob? So for example, like this, or could I use this threaded insert with a cap screw or a bolt so that, again, I could tighten a jig or a fixture to the fence? They got back with me and said, yes, you absolutely can. Now notice that it's a little smaller on the front, it's larger on the back, so that insert is flared out on the back, which should allow us to basically pull on that with our 1/4 bolt or machine screw, and that should make it a bit more firm. Now, because this sits below the surface, if you want to use this for a miter slot or a miter bar, you're going to have to put a washer between this and your jig, because when you tighten this, it's going to pull tight against the bottom of the T-slot, which is what it's designed to do. It's a smart idea. Let's put this over here on our fence. And we could add our knob, for example. Now, this is not the way I like to use these because I don't want the tip of my my knob or bolt, if you will, bottoming out on this aluminum channel. Does it matter? No, not really. But I don't I don't want to mar that aluminum. And I think the better clamping action takes place when the head of the bolt or the head of the knob hits the jig and then pulls this tight against the T-slot. I think that's better because not only is it holding the T-slot in place, but it's holding the fence or the jig in place. So an example of that might be something like this fence. I originally had this attached to a different fence system that had carriage bolts passing through here. But one of the things I would want to do in this case would be to put a washer under the head of this, so that way I'm spanning that recess. And then we'll just go ahead and catch that threaded insert in that T-nut. And there you can see I can slide this along my fence and then lock it in place. Now, a couple other things that we can do with this, which I think make it a clever design. If I want to have a larger clamping distance here, I can purchase from the plumbing department at your local hardware store or home center a longer toilet bolt. And you want to make sure that it's 1/4 thread. There are 2 different threads typically used. Now, these are snap-off threads. These are designed so that you can install these and break them off at the length that you need. But you can see I could install this just as easily in this. Again, slide that O-ring down to hold it in place. But that could be used as well for taller material. Or even another option here, because they're 1/4 they could also be used with these coupling nuts. So if I wanted to, I could extend the length of these with a coupling nut, and then I could add on whatever other piece of hardware I intend to use with it. Like me, you might be thinking that little nylon set screw in there is kind of a neat trick. Can you do that with the Shopsmith T-Nuts? Well, if you add a 1/4 nylon set screw, you absolutely can lock the T-nut in place. So what's the bottom line? You can pick these up on Amazon between $7, $10. Why the variant? It's because they're sold by different resellers. So, just look for the best price. I think they're all right. Shopsmith users can use them. Of course, non-Shopsmith users, they'll be a little more sloppy than they are even in the Shopsmith. As for the Shopsmith T-Nuts, I think these are the real winners. I would absolutely recommend you buy these from Shopsmith. Right now, they're about, what did I see? $21 for 4. And it will be the version that has 3 threaded holes, 2 that are threaded 1/4, 1 that is 3/8/16. I think that's the winner. Now, of course, you're going to pay some shipping on it, so I don't know what it's going to come to a piece, but I bet it's less than 10 cents a piece, like we'd be paying for the MicroJig version. Can you use this on non-Shopsmith machines? Yes. It'll sit a little bit lower in the slot, which means it's not going to be in the way. There'll be slightly more side-to-side play, but less than the side-to-side play you get with the MicroJig version. I'll put a link to them. It's not an affiliate link. If you want to buy the MicroJig version, that is an affiliate link, so I appreciate you clicking on it. But other than that, leave your questions, comments, and cheap shots. We'll talk a bit more about this later when I get back from a brief trip. So in the meantime, make it a great day. All right, so what's the bottom line? In my opinion, I think these are fine. They cost somewhere between $7 and $10 a piece on Amazon. Your local woodworking store might have them for less, I don't know.